Why do you want to hunt?
Because you all think that I can't. I saw a sign in the sky. I'm ready.
Mauwi, Nita.
There's something out there. I'm coming with you.
You can't.
I'm trying to protect you.
Protect me from what? It's time.
It knows how to hunt. I know how to survive. Whatever did this, I can kill it.
Gang, we're back. All right, Prey. We're talking about Prey today. So if anyone doesn't know, of course, Prey is a sequel to the Predator franchise. It's the latest one, and my first impression, I was looking forward to this. I like the original Predator. Predator 2 is decent, maybe a little underrated in some ways. Predators was aggressively meh for me. I mean, enjoyable on a certain level, but pretty forgettable. And I never even saw the Alien versus Predators movies. So for this one, I was like, okay, another Predator movie. But then I saw the trailer and I realized what they were doing with it. And I thought, this could be really interesting. And I was just blown away. How did you react to this?
I pretty much have the same exact opinions. I've seen the AVP movies and I actually really enjoyed both of them, but for different reasons. But yeah, Predator 2, very much underrated. Danny Glover was phenomenal in that movie, and like just seeing the Predator in the city was like really cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, Prey, I was pretty kind of skeptical going into this one because of just Predators was an aggressive meh, and then like you said, and then the Predator was just terrible. It was.
I didn't even mention that. Yeah. I haven't
was,
seen it, and I've heard horrible things about it. I never bothered with it.
You don't need to.
That's what I've heard. I've heard a couple of the things that they did with it, and I'm like, what?
It was so bad. But yeah, no, I thought Prey was phenomenal. I really liked what they did with it. I thought it was a pleasant surprise, to say the least.
I was really upset that this was not released in the theaters. After I watched it, I thought that this should have been a theatrical release, but given the poor performance critically and I'm assuming financially of the Predator, I can see why they kind of a little more timidly, let's just put it on Hulu and see what happens.
Yeah.
And so far, as from what I understand, it's done very well. It's the best. I think it's the most viewed thing on Hulu at all, and it's gotten great reviews. So,
Okay.
but that kind of leads us to what's up with the Predator series. Like, what was the original, like John McTiernan's now classic action film? Why was it so popular? Why was it gather so much attention to want to continue making all these sequels, some of which suck? And now, and correct me if I'm wrong, since you've seen the Alien versus Predator movies, it seems like that was something almost in its own kind of universe.
Yeah.
Right. So, and it was based on the comics, I think, or
Yep,
it
exactly.
was just kind of going off on a different tangent. And as I'm not an expert on Predator canon or anything like that, but from what I understand, for Prey, they changed some of the previous ideas of the canon that the AVP movies had sort of cooked up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And apparently not too many people are really all that upset about that. They don't, like, whatever.
Yeah, AVP, I mean, they based off the comic books. I mean, they had comic books at one point, I think Batman versus Predator. Like just like,
of course.
There's actually, I think there's a video on YouTube. I'll send it your way, and for viewers watching this, definitely check it out. It's like a video of the Batman v Predator. It's just hilarious. It's actually pretty awesome though. But I think Prey was a little bit of like a course correction in terms of the lore and the timeline. But regardless, it was I don't care at all. It was so good.
Well, I've got a lot of thoughts on this movie because it taps into a lot of really interesting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
My opinion of the Predator, the original movie, and the reason why it worked so well is because it tapped into this very ancient ancestral memory of the hunt. And they do a great job in that. McTiernan does a great job in that movie of showing us these big hyper macho, hyper testosterone, jacked up dudes, Arnold and Carl Weathers and all these really Jesse Ventura,
yeah.
right? A pro wrestler, and he's great in this too. He's just being himself, all that. And they go in there and they just kick butt, and they're like just cracking one-liners and everything, and then they get their ass kicked hard by the Predator. So that's, I think, a lot of the lure of the movie is that twist.
Mm-hmm.
Is that like, okay, these are the best we got going right now. They got the best weaponry, they got the best training, blah blah blah, and they're getting creamed. So now what? You got this alien, he's got lasers, he's got camouflage and all this kind of stuff. So they're laid low by a hunter, even though these guys have the most advanced weapons and techniques. They get laid low by someone who one-ups them. They got more advanced techniques and more advanced technology. And so I think that taps into this probably a primordial fear, I think, that Homo sapiens has of hunting the hunter. And I'm not sure exactly who wrote Prey, if it was the director or what, but they get it. They really get it. I think they really understood these nuances here that I think a lot of the sequels didn't quite get. That humans have always been in an environment where there were other apex predators roaming around, competing for the same resources. And so there were times when we had to encounter lions or tigers or bears, oh my. And so this whole idea of we're facing off against something else that's also a really good predator, and who's going to win, right? And that probably predates Homo sapiens. I'm betting that proto-humans had to deal with that too. And so it's probably on the genome. That whole archetypal structural narrative.
Yeah.
Right. So Predator basically creates this in the form of an action movie, And when we're there, we're introduced into, I guess, South American jungle somewhere, and we're kind of traveling along with the Uber mercs.
Mm-hmm.
And once they start getting creamed, that taps into that fear. Like, oh crap, now I'm out here and I'm dealing with something that's just as cunning, if not more so than I am. So it's a great high concept film from the 80s. Yet another one from the 80s. It was like a heyday of those really high concept films. Never intended to be a franchise, and it wasn't a sequel to anything, and all that kind of stuff that they're doing now. So, what are your thoughts on that take?
No, I agree. I think it aside from the machismo and the kind of muscles and all that, which is awesome, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a lot. I think other than T2, I think it's my favorite Arnold Schwarzenegger movie.
Yeah, and I get the great the one-liners, you know, like I ain't got time to bleed, you know.
Bennett, you son of a bitch.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, get it to the chopper.
Yeah, get to the chopper. It's so good, but I think you're right. Like it's like you're experiencing this primal fear of being hunted, right? And no matter what you have, it just seems to keep on coming back and coming back and coming back. And yeah, it's horrifying. It's horrifying not only on an existential level, but like just imagistically, like, you know, tearing people's spines out, you know, with the skull hanging there. Like that's it's terrifying. But well,
and it would not have worked if they hadn't gone full in with the kind of graphic violence of it, because that triggers those primordial memories, that ancestral memories of the savagery and the jungle environment, and it taps into that. The genome recognizes that, as it were, and says, oh, this is something we've encountered before. We better kick in all the instincts and all the fears and all the affects, right? And so we, of course, experience that vicariously, because we all have that in our own, you know, ancestral memory as well. Predator 2 comes along and says, well, let's take this kind of story and flip it and twist it and say it's in the concrete jungle now. And so I think it was still well crafted, I think, and Danny Glover is great, and there was some cool moments in there. But the setting was different enough to not tap into that, because you're in a concrete jungle now, right? Sure, it's dangerous. We know that consciously, but it doesn't tap into those ancient fears of being in the jungle hunted by a predator, which humankind has been in that environment for ages and ages. You know, even the current day hunter-gatherers that live in the Amazon, for example, will occasionally get taken out by jaguars.
Yeah.
Right. So it's still something that happens, right? And of course, a jaguar is an incredibly efficient predator. You know, they're very quick. They're just, you're dead, over,
right.
Bam, you're toast. Right. Of course, they know that, right? The Yanomami tribes and the various tribes that live there, they know that. And they do all kinds of things to avoid it, but it still happens. Predators, strange to create a sequel 20 years later, but you know, that's what they're doing these days. Now, what do you think? Why did that one not quite catch on? It seemed like it did okay and everything, but it just wasn't a huge splash.
So Predator was this kind of confrontation with an alpha predator, right? It's just like you have alphas in the jungle. There's something more out there. I thought Predator 2 was I thought I liked it to the degree that it's like nature will still find a way type thing.
Yeah.
You're in a city and nature will just happen, whether you like it or not. And you have all these cops running around trying to figure out who killed this gang. And it's a giant, crazy alien that's on a hunt, right?
Yeah.
I think Predators, I liked it in concept. You had, you know, this kind of hunting planet, this reserve that the Predators built in order to kind of challenge themselves. I like that idea, but I think it really kind of there's something about you know, just being out in the forest or in the jungle and wondering what's out there. You know, this is what we think is our terrain, but in reality, it's not our friend. It's our context, right? I've heard somebody say this, but it's our context, but it's not our friend.
Yeah.
So I think Predators could have been done a whole lot better. I think it was just it was a nostalgia cash grab to a certain extent.
Yeah.
and I can't see Adrian Brody as being kind of a macho guy at all. I just can't. Yeah.
Well, and Brody's is a phenomenal actor. I mean, he can do anything practically. That part didn't bother me so much as the conflict within the humans. It seemed that, strangely enough, seemed to undermine the whole story, because like with the first Predator, the mercenaries were all a team, and they were always, you know, they had each other's back and everything else. So that invoked this kind of ancient idea of the tribal hunting party or war party. And it's you know, us versus the forces out there that are trying to kill us, whether it's a single predator. If they had stuck to that, I wonder if it wouldn't have done better. Because as it stands, you got a bunch of humans that are under, you know, they're backstabbing and they're plotting against each other and all this stuff. And I'm like, these guys are morons. They deserve to die. They deserve to get ripped to shreds by the predators, and they didn't. And I'm like, I don't believe that, you know?
Yeah.
You know, and then of course they love to kind of lean into the weird character designs and all that. I mean, it was effectively done. It had some great moments and stuff like that, but it just didn't resonate or linger. It didn't. Once you left the theater, you're like, okay, well, now what? That was it. You know, you're just not thinking about it at all. Whereas Predator, I think, would leave an impact. You know, you're always thinking about that. You know, where's that thing? You know. So, you know, the primordial situation we're talking about is the you are being hunted. And of all of these movies, it seems like it does the best when it stays stripped down and focuses on that dynamic. Hunter versus hunter, predator versus predator. And the original movie played, the title has a double meaning, right? Who's the predator? Is it the creature or is it Arnold, right? Dutch. And it turns out, it starts out one and then winds up being the other when he turns the tables on the predator at the end. And they did the same thing with prey. Which one's the prey? Eventually the monster is, you know, the alien is. But if you remember, when I was thinking about this and writing down some notes for this, I got back to our definition, the definition I like to use for horror, sci-fi, and fantasy. And I think that the Predator movies work most effectively as horror. When you get real caught up in the sci-fi element, like some of the other movies have done, and the comics, of course, they go bananas with this stuff because they love to, like, there's a name for the species and they've got all of these different kinds and all this kind of stuff. Unfortunately, what that does for me is explain it. It explains the creature, which makes it not terrifying anymore. Because now we know what it is. It's the unknown that's always the most terrifying, right? So, you know, and other things that jump out at me, I'm sure there's an answer to this somewhere, and somebody out there could correct me, but they call the creature the Yautzi, I think is the name of the species. Okay, who calls them this? Is it humans?
Right.
And in which case, where did the word come from? Is it the alien language? If so, where did they learn that from? Or the predators teach it to them? I mean, where does this knowledge come from?
And if they talk in clicks, like how do you know that's what they call themselves?
Yeah. So
yeah, no, I get it.
I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. So again, remember, horror, of course, as we've talked about before, is when we are being invaded, like the human world is being invaded by a mysterious force of destruction. And it's about human devolution, the horror is. Fantasy is about encountering the divine or the mysterious, and science fiction is about human evolution. Where are we headed? So they're overlapping, but they're not identical. Some stories tap into multiple genres in this category, like Aliens is like sci-fi and horror. Both the alien and the aliens. The first Alien is more of a straightforward horror, but even still, because it's always about the alien creatures invading the human world and causing destruction and mayhem and leading us to devolve. 2001 is all three, actually, which we haven't talked about that on the channel yet, but
We need to.
we've got the existential horror of man versus the gigantic black void of space, which Kubrick really gives you dizzying images to bring and evoke that fear. And then, but at the end, you're encountering the divine and the mysterious, and it's about our evolution into that. So it's all three. But Predators, I think, works best when it's just treated as pure horror, like it does here and in the first one and the second one too. And the second one, they get sci-fi. They get a little wild with the sci-fi at the end, but you know, it's okay. It's okay because that, you know, they've done so much great horror up to that point. So thoughts, agreement, disagree? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think it gets back. What you said was when they really just kind of strip it down to its base foundation, I think it really makes it what it is that with all the lore, with all the stories behind it, it really kind of, it can detract away from the core essence of what this story really represents. And I think, again, with Prey, they did a great job with it by bringing it back down to that level and saying, the core foundation of this story, the core foundation of the Predator and what it means is very much just a kind of primal threat, primal horror, but it's something that is a kind of like, it's a necessary part of kind of this ancestral memory, the human experience.
Yeah, so it's a connection to the human
Yeah.
element is what is missing when we get super deep into the lore of the Predators. Honestly, you know what I think is going on behind that is that the Predators are so cool that it's kind of like wish fulfillment. Like it's a power fantasy. I want to be like these guys, so I want to learn more about them so I can imagine myself as a predator. You know, I think that's kind of what's behind that, and which of course you can't, that cannot coexist with the horror element. Because if that's a classic move, is to identify with the monster.
Yep.
You know, that's a classic, you know, shadow move. Children do this when they're scared by monsters. They will then pretend like they are the monster, and then it's not scary anymore. It's an effective technique, right? And apparently adults do it too.
I have a friend who, whenever he goes to see a Halloween movie, he roots for Michael Myers. He's like, no, he's the main character. And I'm like, no. That's not how it works. But I think you're right. I think it's because it's like it strips away the fear of it, the unknown of it. It's just saying, oh, if I'm like that, I'm like, yeah, no.
Well, and you get that problem with, and this may be the fundamental problem with Predators, is that there's no time with the main characters. They are literally dropped into the scene by parachute, right? Yeah. And you know, that might be a cool way to jump into an action movie, but with horror, you can't do that. It doesn't work because you have to establish the main characters, which the first Predator did well, and so did Predator 2. You get to care about these guys, and then you rip their world apart with monsters and mayhem. And all well done horror movies do this. You have enough time to care about them before they start getting their butts kicked. Same thing, they did that with Prey too. Right. Yeah, you get to know the tribe, you get to know the people, and you get to know Naru and what she's trying to accomplish and what she's up against, which leads us into the main character. Now, here's a potentially incendiary question for you. Why does this, in my opinion, this female-led movie work where others might be labeled as woke? Okay. All right.
That is a very incendiary.
It's potentially contentious question, but I don't think there was. Well, number one, what do we mean by woke? Right. What does that mean? That word gets tossed around all. Let me explain what I think that means. First, I think people use that word, and it's almost been defined out of existence now. It's just like a synonym for something I don't like. Oh, it's woke. But outside of that kind of boneheaded use of the word, I think what people are complaining about when they label it something that is they feel the presence of an agenda or a theme that is very on the nose in its execution. So if you're writing a story about female empowerment, say, which is a fine thing to do, you don't want to beat people over the head with it, or else they're going to feel like they're being preached to, and then they'll start saying it's woke. But casting a female lead in an action movie is not woke. It's all about execution, and this I think is done very well. But I want to get your reflections on that.
Well, I think it's like the message of the prevailing spirit, the message of the zeitgeist, right? And you have movies that really, the Star Wars sequel trilogy is a prime example. You have Mulan, right? The recent Disney movie, or shouldn't say recent, I mean, within the last couple of years.
Yeah.
You have a lot of movies that are coming out, and it's almost as if like there's no challenge, because challenges would insinuate that the main character, who could be female, has weakness, right? And weakness can't be seen. And I think that's a problem, because it isn't human, right? Regardless if it's male or female, it isn't human. We all have weaknesses, and we all have to overcome something in order to evolve. Like that's I don't think life is suffering, but there is struggle, right? And it's a part of our development. And I feel like that's when these movies become more of a kind of allegorical political message than they do reality, right?
Because the only thing they have to overcome is society's screwed up ideas about what they're supposed to be doing. And that's, I think there's, again, you can do that well and you can do it poorly. I thought they had their work cut out for them in a sense here, because they wanted this story to be about Naru, not about women in general, right? So in order to do that and avoid that kind of clunky theme exploration, you got to give us a real character to work with, someone who has complexity, who has motivations of her own, that is not trying to be a representative of all females or all anythings. And this I know that Trachtenberg chose the Comanche in part because they had a fairly gender segregated society. Now, I'm not an expert on Comanche tribes or any of that stuff, but as I do know that there has been women warriors in various tribes. I think Comanche is one of them too. So it's not impossible that this happened, but at the same time, it probably wasn't real common. Okay, and so what they had to do here was say, Naru really wants to be a hunter, not necessarily a warrior, but a hunter. Although you could say that in Comanche society, there was not much of a differentiation there. But let's just go with that, right? And say that's what she was trying to do. So you had to say she wants to do that, but then let's depict that struggle, but not insult what the typical women were doing, right? And because you don't want it to come across like she wants to be a hunter because all that girl stuff is lame. That would not be a great way to deliver that message. And I think they did it successfully here, because even though it's pretty understated, and there's an early establishing scene where her mother says, "Why do you want to be a hunter?" And she says, "Because you people think I can't," which is kind of a typical modern answer to that question. But they added some other layers to it as well, and that her mom looks at her using the axe and says, that was not you. You know, she says, your father left that for you to cut roots, not to hunt with. You know, and she doesn't say anything in response. I don't think. But the implication, at least when I was watching it, was that a big part of her wanting to be a hunter was because of her father. All right, and she lost her father, right? And see, that I can understand. I can get that. And that might be a reason, other than just having her own kind of internal drive to be a hunter. But it also may be about her father too, in a way of remain close to him. So I thought it was nice. It wasn't, they didn't beat you over the head with it. It wasn't, they didn't drone on and on about it, but it was there.
Yeah,
I thought. I think I would have liked it more if they had just explored that just a little bit more about her motivation, other than just, I want to do it because you people think I can't do it. That was kind of flimsy to me, but you could tell there was more to it there. At least the actress was able to imply that there was, through her acting skills, whether it was in the script or not. She seemed to carry more than that with her performance, I thought. Speaking of which, I thought she really carried the movie.
Yeah. No, great actors.
Yeah, the whole crew actually amazing, and it's so cool that they got folks with various native backgrounds to do this, and to the producer is a Comanche herself, right, which is totally awesome. So, but this does bring up the whole individual versus society bit again, which is very, pronounced conflict that we see in modern movies. But the thing is, though, the Comanche, as far as I understand it, well, they didn't have like a universal code or law or anything like that. They were a collection of tribes with a common culture and a language, but they didn't have any rules that said women can't be hunters, period.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there was any such rule like that. I don't think they would have had a rule like that, because their world was very much, if it works, use it. The 18th and 19th century was kind of the heyday of the Comanches, and they were just running wild and free and doing whatever the hell they wanted to do at that time in history. But it was a very violent world. There was rival tribes, there was Apache, there was Europeans, and there was all kinds of mayhem and carnage going on. And so if some woman came forth and turned out to be a great hunter, they would have said, "Come on, let's go, let's kill the bad guys, hunt, do whatever." So they really had, I think, a lot of different challenges in presenting the story like this, with a female lead. And I've watched some interviews, and the director said that he was really trying to show a underdog story. And so that was why he picked that angle. And so when you do that, of course, it sets up all these story problems you've got to figure out. Like, how do I do this without it being preachy, without it being political, without it being all this, that, and the other? And when I say political, I don't mean it has to be, you don't want it to be overtly political. I mean, everything is political.
It can be.
It can be. Yeah, I'll throw that caveat out there. Anything can be somewhat political anyway.
Well, I think what makes it so, again, different from what you might consider as woke is that she's trying to prove her worth with the tribe. And I think like the key concept there is that there is this ritual of initiation that she has to go through. And where other stories just say, nope, perfect. Like, it can do no wrong, has no challenges, this, that, and the other. I think that's the biggest difference, because it makes it so much more relatable to the actual human experience. Mm-hmm. And if again, like stripping this story down, the story really is a kind of, it does get down to actual human experience in survival situations, mm-hmm. right? I mean, we don't experience giant aliens coming down hunting, trying to prove themselves. But it's interesting that as she was going through an initiation, so was the predator, right? It's interesting that, you had the added dynamic of these hunters who had a kind of disrespect for the land, and killing all these buffalo just for their hides. Whereas the predator, who is this apex creature, apex predator, has a code of conduct.
Yeah. It's
not explicitly said, but he does. He's like, well, I'm not going to kill something that's not a threat to me. Right. But if you are a threat, you better watch out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That was a nice twist. And there's layers like that are in this movie and none others, not even the first one. So I think that's really cool, the way they took the best parts of the first movie and added some nuances to it like that. And I noticed those too. We'll get into that a little bit later, but yeah, absolutely. No. You're getting ahead of me.
All right, sorry. I'll calm it down.
No, you're good. That's great. So at the beginning, of course, when you see the predator show up and it starts killing other predators just to see, which one's the strongest. We're also seeing this through the eyes of Naru as an underdog, right? Because she's a female, she wants to be a hunter, but then they don't take her seriously. And you see her practicing and screwing up and staying at it, right? So you're really rooting for her at this point already, right? You just can't help yourself. You're like, come on, you can do it. And then you're like, what the hell is she going to do against that thing?
Yeah.
And these guys that are the hunters, they're already proven. And her brother comes back and triumphantly gets, through the ritual and all that stuff, even though he kind of fudged his way through it and didn't give his sister any credit. And that's another character here. It's a great character too. And he's not just a stereotypical one-dimensional thing either.
Yeah.
He's got lots of layers to him, Tabe. So I also like the way that in this, like, so when the preview first came out and we saw what the premise was, that it was Comanche and the leader or the main character is a female and she's going to be facing off against the Predator. Immediately you had people coming out of the woodwork online saying, this is ridiculous. This is going to be woke. It's going to be blah, blah, blah. Because if, Arnold and all these guys that have massive muscles and all this kind of stuff had so much trouble, how in the world is she going to be able to do it? But they didn't do their homework, because number one, the Comanches were absolute beasts in hunting and warfare. They ran the show for years and years, and so it was an interesting choice to pick them, because they were the most effective fighters of the day in that region. That's because of their unparalleled mastery of the horse. But then they didn't even think about the first movie either. Like, all of that testosterone didn't do him any good. And Arnold didn't beat him because he was stronger than him. He outsmarted him and he got lucky. So here, I think in a way they're kind of banking on us thinking that same way. Thinking, oh, she's small, she's not as strong as these guys. She's got no chance. But at the same time that you might be distracted by that, you're watching her do stuff that will ultimately wind up beating the Predator, because they show us that she's observant, she's very agile, she's relentless and very clever, and able to learn quickly, and all of those things are what ends up actually winning for her, right? So that's pretty cool. The other point you make is really good too, about how Naru and the Predator are both on an initiation ritual, and it's strongly implied that he's there as part of his own kind of an initiation. Go to Earth, find the top Predator and kill it, bring back a trophy. Bring that skull back.
Yep.
Right, because he kills the wolf. And
that's what she ends up doing in the end.
Yeah.
But like, and you're talking about like the first Predator. I think it's the kind of the machine, the control, the guns, all of it weren't working, right? It's like what we attempt to control in those situations rarely, I shouldn't say really, but in that case weren't working. Yeah. So Arnold's character Dutch had to, at that point, it's either adapt or die. It's like, okay, yeah, I have to, and he did luck out. And I think a lot of, Prey too, there was this kind of just essence of returning to that natural spirit, like her natural spirit, in order for her to adapt and survive.
Yeah.
Like doing what she does in order for her to manipulate the situation in such a way that she will like inevitably kill this thing and live. Because it was never about brute force.
No, it never was about brute force anyway.
No.
It was about cunning and intelligence.
Yeah.
I mean, this is how humans have hunted for ages, since before there was humans. We never we couldn't go faster or be stronger. We don't have natural weapons and claws and all this kind of stuff. We have to use our intelligence to win. So if you've got a slightly larger and bigger and slightly stronger one of those, you're still going to get your ass kicked if you're going up against a mammoth or a bear, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, ancient humans fought bears with pointed sticks. I mean, it's pretty badass. And you are outgunned and outstrengthed and outsized in that conflict. So what are you supposed to do, right? You got to use your wits. So that's the thing we've leaned on. Well, a female human and a male human have the same, intelligence and ability. So given the fact that she had trained so hard and she had such intensity, I felt believable the way that it played out, that she was able to beat him and use the technology against him too, which was a cool nature versus technology theme. Saw that in there. You mentioned the skin bison. That's an interesting thing, the skin bison scene. both of them kneel down in front of the skin bison and pick up the cigar and ponder it and then put it back. It's like deliberately mirrored Naru and the predator.
Mhm.
I thought that was interesting. They also are both shown in the camp treating their wounds with medicinal skills in her case, or with technology, because they're both injured. And again, the way it's framed, it seems to me, was deliberately paralleling each other to show us that there's a thematic thread between the two of them, right? They're both predators. The frontiersmen, now on the other side, right, on the human side, the frontiersmen use traps to defeat to capture their prey, and so does she. She traps the predator. In fact, Naru uses a trapper as bait for her own trap.
Mhm.
How's that for irony? That was a nice touch. Another cool touch I noticed was the fact that at the end she's whistling at night. Do you know what the significance of that is?
No.
Okay. So among the Comanche, and in fact, among a lot of cultures around the world, there's a strong taboo against whistling at night, because the belief is that it will summon evil spirits.
Mm.
Okay. So, and this I learned from watching interviews with Native people talking about the movie, saying that was put in there for the Native audience, because that taboo is still quite strong in the culture even today. And so when they see her whistling at night, they're going to be like, oh damn, she's not messing around, right? She whistles at night to summon the evil spirit, and the evil spirit comes, right? She's like, let's go, right? So only somebody who's just done is going to do that, right? And she, at that point in the story, of course, she's just done, right? Her brother's dead and all that, so she's pissed. Funny enough, that is not unique to the Americas. Actually, you can see that same taboo in China, and I looked this up, in Turkey, and so it's an archetypal idea.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. So you stumble upon these every once in a while. It's another archetypal idea. Whistling at night summons up evil spirits, whatever those spirits are depicted as in the culture in Japan, China, wherever it is.
Mm.
So yeah, her yeah, and I don't know what she was thinking when she did that scene, but her expression on her face was just like, I'm done screwing around, right?
Right.
Let's go, mano a mano, man. So yeah, and so then the other thing, right? So the other thing people comment on, the technology difference. So in the first Predator, the Predator creature had more advanced technology than the mercs did. So again, when you look at this, you're like, oh, there's this big technology difference, and the natives only had bows and arrows. What are they going to do against the predator? Well, all the advanced, painless didn't do it any good against the predator. So what? So what's the difference? And in fact, I look at this and I say the predator is actually in a worse situation in this case than he was in the first movie, because in the first movie, yeah, he's going up against these jacked up mercenary dudes, right? In this movie, he's going after the Comanche. And the Comanche, and a lot of the Plains tribes of this era, they were warriors and hunters from as soon as they could walk, right? If they were able to and they could, they were learning how to do it. Children would help torture other warriors who had been captured to death. All right. They did not mess around. They had no chill. They were not messing around. So the predators dropped in that kind of culture, right? You're dealing with these kind of guys, right? Their whole attitude is that of kill or be killed, because that's the way it's been for them for decades and decades. So I'm like, he doesn't know what he's getting into. And he's like, he's only fighting one of them.
Right.
Yeah, because a whole bunch of them, and in fact, Tabe, once he gets a horse, he spears him, and that was, that's what their expertise was in. They mastered the horse like that.
Well,
and that's what led them to.
There's a parallel between that also in the cougar, the lion. So she spears the lion.
That's right.
And then falls, gets knocked out, right? Tabe ends up being the one that kills the lion, or the mountain lion. He spears the predator. She's end up being the one to kill.
Oh yeah, that's right. They flipped it around, didn't they?
Yeah.
I didn't notice that. That's a good pickup. Yeah. So I thought that was kind of interesting, but it's easy to miss that piece if you don't know much about the
Yeah.
Comanche. You know, if you have this sort of Hollywood stereotype idea of native tribes as all being peace loving and singing
Oh, no.
kumbaya and passing around the peace pipe and all that stuff, that's a bunch of nonsense, right? At that time period, they were ferocious warriors, absolutely ferocious.
Yeah.
And the business about the torturing, right? So that was common in that time period amongst those tribes to do that kind of thing to each other. It was a ritual nature to it as well. But the warriors, of course, knew this was going to happen to them if they got captured too.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was this whole business about if you're being tortured, what you're supposed to do is show them how you're not affected by it. You sing battle songs and you just laugh it off and all that kind of to the best of your ability. And if you're able to control the screaming to a significant degree, it's seen as bad luck for the torturers, right? So there was this whole dynamic going on there, and it's very complex. So it's easy to oversimplify that, but so these guys are ready to be tortured to death, and then he wants to fight with these guys. I mean, I wouldn't want to fight those guys. They don't mess around, man. They do not mess around.
But I mean, in the film, even a deeper connection with the land that they're on, you know, and knowing it and being so intimately tied to it and a part of it. And I think that's kind of what makes this movie special in that regard, is because you get to see firsthand how an intimacy with the world around you and a respect for it can add in adaptation and survival, you know.
Yeah. And look at and that's a great theme that you bring up, right? So you got the Comanche who are like that. They're very connected with the land, with the hunt, and they understand the terrain and the plants and all of that. Then on the other hand, you get the strip mining French, right? Basically just coming in and just doing whatever, and they don't pay any attention to that at all. And of course, then you've got the predator who's just coming in to kill for the lulls. He's not connected to the land. In fact, both the predator and the French skin the animal and leave the carcass. They don't bother with the rest of it. So the other, and of course, like you say, the others is over-reliance on the technological tools. So it's a great scene where the French shoot at the predader. And
no.
then all of a sudden they're like,
no.
okay, let's reload. Right?
Yeah, they're trying to reload the muskets.
That's not going to work.
Yeah, no, Yeah, that was, well, it kind of reminded me of the first movie. It's just like you have all these guns, you have all this tech, you set up this trap, this live human bait, right? Yeah, and it means nothing. It means nothing.
Because you don't know what you're dealing with. It's
yeah,
the knowledge is deficient there.
Right. Well, it's just like we've gone camping and stuff like that, you know, being out in nature, and you can be as prepared as possible, but you never know what could happen. You never know what could kind of cross your path. It could be a bear, it could be an angry bull buffalo. I mean, who knows? So
you got to adapt quickly.
Yeah.
And think on your feet, and that's part of the thrill of it. That's part of the fun because of that. It's not 100% controlled. And so here we've got these in this native tribe that is born and bred in that environment. Mm-hmm. And Naru, who is exceptional in the way that she's able to adapt rapidly and learn very quickly. She figures out the way that the gun works, the laser-sighted gun, and figures out how to deal with the camouflage, and figures out how to use the gun real quick, so in other words, heat vision and fancy guns and tracking devices and bombs and all of this kind of crap are no substitute for cunning, instinct, skill, and intuition.
Yeah,
I think is the underlying lesson of both the first Predator and the second Predator and this one. I don't know what in the world the Predators movie was trying to show. Yeah, whatever. So that's another good theme. In the end, I think that the Predator movies and this one, Prey, are about the hunting instincts.
Yeah.
And how that interacts with modern society, which exists now. In both the first and the second one, the main character of those respective movies had to strip down and use only their instincts to defeat the predator. That's what it represented. It's like that knowledge that deep down you're going to have to just rely on what you got, and all that other fancy stuff. What if it doesn't work? What do you have left? That's a strong message for modern, highly industrialized and technologically, embedded society. And the premise of throwing the story into 1719 in the plains means that you can give that, you can deliver that same theme, and it's even more powerful. Because these people, they didn't have anything but those things and a few relatively primitive weapons, although they were very proficient with those things, with bows and spears. I mean, they knew what they were doing with those things, but that's not the same thing as a bazooka. But you know what? At the end of the day, it didn't matter, right? And she wound up figuring out how to turn his own weapon against him. So then the message then seems to be that the most effective hunter is the one with the most powerful mind, and all of that other stuff is just bells and whistles. Wouldn't you say?
I would say most powerful mind, but in tune with the environment, right?
Yes, right. That incorporates that,
Yeah,
of course.
right. Like,
I think you're right.
Knowing your surroundings and knowing how to utilize it properly. And I mean, yeah, there's a lot of just commentary on the kind of where we're at and nature and how those two things coincide, and this disconnect that a lot of technology, or again, not demonizing technology, but what it can create in terms of that disconnect, right? And getting back in tune with those more primal instincts, a will to survive.
Yeah, that's a good point too. It's easy to demonize technology, but we're using it right now, of course.
Yeah, right,
and,
yeah.
And in fact, technology is nothing new. Humans have been using technology for as long as there's been humans.
Yeah.
And animals use technology. They will pass down techniques, right? Technology is just a technique. It's a way of accomplishing a particular goal.
Yeah.
And humans have developed it to a very advanced degree very rapidly in the last at least a couple of hundred years. It's changed rapidly, put it that way. And so it should be no surprise then that a lot of our resonant narratives are about that very theme, because the psyche, the self, the unconscious or whatever, is trying to make sense of, okay, now I'm in an environment that has all of this technology. What does this mean? And if we look at the themes in broad strokes of many of the sci-fi and fantasy and horror narratives that have been really resonant, that theme's in there. It's in Star Wars, it's in Predator, it's in all of these others, and it's saying, and it's in Dune, of course, very much so. It's saying technology has tremendous power, but it's not limitless. It has its drawbacks, it has trade-offs, and we're just now trying to figure out what those are. We don't necessarily know what they all are. 2001 is another one. Where our technology almost kills us, and we have to go past it to win, to survive, right? That's the only way you win. But technology itself, or macho guys or cigars and fancy gizmos, none of that stuff is as powerful as ferocity, cunning instincts, observation, connection with nature, discipline, determination, all that stuff. I think this version of that story drilled down to that, the most of all of them so far, to that core of what the Predator stories are really about, at their most resonant, I think.
Yeah. Be wary of falling in love with your own creation. And don't forget what the tools that you use. I mean, at the end of it, she had to use tools in order for her to survive. The string attached to her axe, that's a tool, right?
Yeah.
All of it kind of accumulates. I think it's what we ought to do with the things that we have, and making sure that we don't disconnect from our nature too far, or will mistake what we've created for what is, and
Right.
not what it's meant to contribute to, you know?
But yeah. And in fact, Dune has leaned so hard into that idea. It says that I'm going to talk about the story that happens after people figure that out.
Yeah.
And plus, you know, if there's any native viewers out there, they can maybe answer this question for me, because I've looked and I can't find it anywhere. I'm curious as to whether anyone ever threw axes with cords attached to them as a combat technique or hunting technique. I don't know. Maybe it seems like it would work, but
It kind of reminded me of Scorpion.
Yeah.
In the movie. Because she was doing it
here.
so quick. I was like, how the hell is that I'm like, all right, I get it. It's a movie. Like,
Yeah.
don't take it, you know, too seriously, right? You know,
Don't get too carried away with
don't
the
get too
details.
carried away. But I was just like, damn, like I've thrown axes, but I can't throw an axe like that. That's crazy. It's yeah. It was nuts. No, I really enjoyed it. I think it really, aside from the first one or the first two, it's like either my second or third favorite out of the entirety of it. I thought it was really good, but I think you're absolutely right. It stripped it down to the extent where it really became so much more resonant and archetypal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope if they do another one, right, I hope they really stick with this.
Yeah.
This kind of dynamic, like really just make it about nature, make it about the kind of the aggression in nature and the need for adaptation. Just please don't add in any unnecessary messages that don't need to be there, whether it's
Right. That or
right, you know, like
get sidetracked by the sci-fi stuff and get kind of lost in all of that stuff. I mean, we could probably do a whole video on how in the world you're supposed to make an Alien versus Predator movie work. You know, outside of just kind of a fun action, you know, carnage fest.
Well, that's what it is. Yeah.
Which I'm sure that's what it is. And Paul Anderson, that's his shtick, right? That's what he does.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, at the end credits there, where they had the actual hide art depictions of the movie, and they actually brought in modern day Comanche hide art experts to do that artwork for them.
Really?
Yeah, it's really cool. But at the very last scene, you've got aliens coming in from outer space to invade the scene, right? So it's kind of a teaser of maybe they'll make some more of these, you know. Who knows? If they do, it'd be cool to see more of Naru and those characters.
Something that we didn't discuss, but I did think was significant, was the kind of the ideas around a divine sign. So
yes, that's right.
The Thunderbird, right? She thought it was a Thunderbird. And at the beginning, it's interesting, when she was hunting with her brother, they were hunting an eagle or a hawk that had a fish, right? So yeah, a lot of like symbolism there.
That's right.
But I thought that,
you know, it's funny. You could look at that and say, well, she's just got a primitive superstition about it, and it's really a spaceship. But it did herald her hunting trip, and her initiation. So
yeah, right.
Exactly. So
yeah,
it's a coincidence, or is it? You know, I know.
Right.
That's it. But that's a good point. That's a very good point on that. And there's also I forget the name of it, and I heard the producer, who is a Comanche herself, say the word of the creature that they thought it was. It's a mythical creature that they speak of in the movie, and she says that, I think it's one of these, and her brother says, you think it's a creature from our childhood stories. You know, but as I seem to remember that it is kind of like the Predator, actually. The creature is itself, and so you know, maybe they knew more than they thought we thought they did. Who knows? But that was a nice touch too, right? Why wouldn't? Of course, they already have those kinds of stories, as do all cultures, of mysterious creatures that live in the darkness, and this is one.
Yeah, for good reason.
Yeah, because there are mysterious creatures in the darkness that want to kill you.
Yeah.
Or there's panthers or whatever.
Right.
All right, well, that's what I got.
What we got?
A great
All right.
movie. Had a lot of fun with it. I hope they make more.
Yeah.
Such a great thing to see so much of the native population getting to come in and make a mainstream movie, whatever that word means. But just getting the recognition and seeing it from their point of view, right? Not as a stereotype or Hollywoodized, hyper spiritualized, characters,
Right.
but real fleshed out three-dimensional characters. That's really great.
Thought it was awesome.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
All right.
All right, Dr. G.
Okay.
Later. Thank you.
Yeah. See ya.
Bye.